Hello, Gen Z. I never
Gen
thought
Z.
we'd get to this
Say
point,
goodbye
but
to
I guess
Gen
time
Z.
really flew by
Say
when we
hello
were
to
having
Gen
so much
A.
fun learning through a computer screen,
Yo.
watching life get more expensive, and preparing for yet another economic downturn about to arrive. Here's the cherry on top. The era of Generation Z is coming to an end. In fact, 2024 will be the final year of Gen Z's undisputed status as the youth in society. And from 2025 onward, our generation will see a continuous decline in our impact on youth culture, which you can think of as the ideas, trends, memes, and slang young people create that are largely separate from broader society. For the past 15 years, Generation Z became increasingly influential in this space, creating more and more of the culture youths enjoy today. But for the next 15 years, Gen Z's impact will diminish further and further, while Generation Alpha takes over as the new kids in town. Like it or not, Gen Z is now at the top of the roller coaster we call youth, and since we're at the peak, it naturally means that there's only one direction left to go: down. Now, before you protest and exclaim, no, that can't be true, we just got here. Yeah, well, I guess that's how millennials felt when we suddenly invaded all those years ago. For our whole lives up to this point, we were always the newer, younger, cooler generation in society. But unfortunately, this is the beginning of the end to that. And from 2025 onward, as Gen Alphas become teenagers, they'll be gaining more and more influence with each passing year, while Gen Z slowly fades into adulthood. But first, who exactly are Gen Alphas? One way to understand this generation would be to look at the years associated with them. The beginning and end for each generation is always subject to debate. But to refresh our memory, baby boomers are generally considered to be born between 1946 to 1964, Gen X between 1965 to 1979, Millennials between 1980 to 1994, Gen Z between 1995 to 2009, and Gen Alpha between 2010 to 2024.
Wow, 2010.
But just knowing the years associated with Gen Alpha doesn't really help us understand who they are as a generation. A better way would be to look at significant events that dramatically changed their generation and the world around them. Gen Z's unique upbringing was coming to age in a post-9/11, post-Great Recession world, which impacted not just the US, but most of the West through increasing government surveillance, rising income inequality, and a greater distrust of government and corporations. In contrast, Gen Alpha's unique upbringing is characterized by being the first generation to be born into a world completely dominated by smartphones, iPads, AI, and other technologies. Many people forget that just over a decade ago, only a minority of Americans had a smartphone, and they were even less common in other countries. And so, every generation before Gen A can still remember a world without these devices, without the excessive use of social media, and without the ubiquity of the internet. The transition of many important parts of our lives like work, school, and entertainment from the physical world to the virtual was only accelerated by the pandemic. It is now becoming easier than ever to live your entire life on the internet. Need to go shopping? There's Amazon. Need to eat? There's DoorDash. Need to get an education? There's online classes. Need to make money? There's remote jobs. Or OnlyFans. Need friends or even a partner? There's apps for that too. And once AI gets good enough, friendships and relationships with these algorithms will become an option for people as well, eliminating the need to form connections with actual humans at all. Unlike previous generations, Gen Alpha will never experience a world before all this, and the implications of growing up in such a dramatically different environment have yet to be fully understood. When looking at the generations, you might notice a pattern here. Every one of them after the boomers has been roughly 15 years in length. So to understand Gen Z's impending downfall, all we have to do is go back 15 years to see the exact same thing happen to millennials. The year is 2009, and Obama was just inaugurated president thanks in large part to the youth at the time, millennials, voting him in. Compare that to Gen Z having to vote for either this
and Joan.
Oh my God, yo.
I'm going to pronounce right.
Our president.
Kawawa.
Or this. and even better, twice in a row. Political polarization is at an all-time high, and with over 60 countries voting this year, it's more important than ever to understand different perspectives and biases that come with everything you see on the news. And the best way to do that is with Ground News, a sponsor that I'm excited to be partnering with today. I've actually rejected every other sponsor so far, but Ground News is special in that it's not only something I use, but it also has real value to anyone who wants to be better informed about the world. Millennials and Gen Z are getting their news from the internet, and so it's more important than ever that Ground News exists to show us how every story is being covered across the political spectrum. Take, for example, news about Chicago becoming the latest American city to call for a ceasefire to the ongoing war in Gaza. With Ground News, we can see that it's being covered by 26 different sources, but what's super interesting is how there's plenty of center and left-leaning sources for this particular story, but barely any coverage by the right. What I love about Ground News is how they're able to take all the articles for each story and show me the political bias, factuality, and ownership of all these sources. I can also see how each side covers every story differently, like how right-wing articles call it a demand and mention how anti-Semitism is growing, but left-wing sources call it historic and a victory for progressives. So with the ongoing war in Ukraine and Gaza, and so many elections coming up this year, Ground News is a perfect website and app to getting the full picture for everything. By using my link in the description, you can join for less than $1 a month, and for a limited time.
That's a very good ad that they just put in. You
can also get 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. So be sure to go to ground.news/bofang to get the best understanding of your news today. Anyway, so it's 2009, and by now, everything new and fun and exciting was definitively millennial. Throughout the 15 years prior to this point, millennials were slowly but surely dominating and pushing out Gen X to be the younger, newer generation in youth culture. Smosh, College Humor, Higa, and Ray William Johnson were all examples of content made by millennials for millennials, and we as Gen Z consumed it too because, well, our generation wasn't really old enough to make stuff for ourselves. We were essentially the younger siblings to millennials, passively exploring the world created for us by those who were older. Rage Comics, The Annoying Orange, Planking, The Duck Song, Crazy Frog, and Slenderman were such examples, but Zoomers enjoyed them just as much, if not more than millennials. So much so that some of them like Country Balls, Trollface, Pepe the Frog, and Wojak are still used by us to this day. But then, something happened after 2009. Generation Z started becoming teenagers and were beginning to develop their own culture, distinct from the trends, memes, and slang that millennials had created up to that point. Slowly but surely, more and more content started to be created not just for Zoomers, but by Zoomers as well. Yeah. As the 2010s progressed further, it became clearer than ever that Gen Z was growing its position within youth culture, diminishing the millennials that had dominated just a few years prior. This is the exact same thing that will happen with Generation Alpha today. Just like from 2010 for Gen Z, from 2025 onward, a brand new culture created by Gen Alpha will develop. But wait, haven't they already started? Well, many people are mistakenly identifying more recent slang as Gen Alpha, which isn't really true. Terms like Riz, Bet.
We all know what a phantom tax is. That's insane, bro. That's insane. Do you know what a phantom tax is, below? That's insane, bro. Riz, Bet.
Yeah, on
yeah.
God.
On
Cap.
God, Cap.
And pretty much anything mentioned in the song.
What song is this? I'm glad.
Are not truly Gen Alpha. These were all words created by Gen Z for Gen Z. It's just that Gen Alpha, like a younger sibling, copied what was being said and used it to the point where it became cringy and annoying. So yes, these terms are definitely part of Gen Alpha's culture right now, but sadly, us Zoomers have to take responsibility for creating and using them in the first place. Okay, you might say, but surely there's something that exists right now that's clearly Gen Alpha and not part of Gen Z. And yes, you'd be half correct. This video wouldn't be complete without mentioning Skibbity Toilet, one of the first trending memes driven almost exclusively by Gen A rather than Gen Z. Bursting into the spotlight in 2023, this bizarre masterpiece featuring toilets with human heads fighting humanoids with CCTVs for heads is pulling billions of views and was growing even faster than Mr. Beast. But even Skibbity Toilet isn't truly Gen Alpha. Since yes, it's definitely enjoyed by Gen Alpha, but almost everything about it comes from Gen Z.
That's real?
The songs in the show have been used by Gen Z for years, and any Zoomer or Millennial who used to watch YouTube poops or SFM videos will immediately recognize the frenetic, unpredictable animations used throughout the series. Even the creator himself is someone definitively part of Gen Z. A comparison can be made with Fred, a series on YouTube that blew up 15 years ago, which was made for Gen Z kids at the time, but created by a millennial. So Skibbity Toilet clearly serves as a bridge from Gen Z to Gen A, and a stepping stone to future content created for Gen A by Gen A. Still, the series is absolutely closer to being considered Gen Alpha culture, even if everything about it came from Gen Z. In 2009, no one made a video for millennials pointing out how they were at the pinnacle of their youth, and that over the next 15 years, they would be on a slow but steady decline, giving way for Generation Z to replace them as society's newer, younger, cooler generation. But looking back now, we can clearly see that starting from the 2010s, Gen Z's influence on youth culture only strengthened, while millennials only weakened. And it's in this exact same way where we find ourselves now in the final year of Generation Z's peak, with our cachet and relevance in the space only declining from here on out. To put it succinctly, Gen Alpha is rising, Gen Z is falling, and millennials are out. Now don't get me wrong, Zoomers, I'm not saying we're old yet. But by 2025, nearly all of us would be fully grown adults, regardless of whether or not we actually feel like one. Generation Z is still very much part of the youth. But to come back to the roller coaster metaphor, we're on the last half of the ride, on the way down. Now, before you get depressed about our generation's inevitable decline, here's the silver lining.
Don't get depressed.
Just like a roller coaster, the best part of youth is going down the ride. The part where we're old enough to make decisions for ourselves, have our own money to spend, and explore life more meaningfully.
You gotta get a job. You gotta do adulting.
Yet young enough to still have much of the curious, ambitious, childlike energy from our earlier days. So as we hold Gen Alpha's hand and guide them in their rise to be society's newer, younger, cooler generation, they will very soon become old enough to let go of our trends, memes, and slang and develop the next generation of youth culture. And as we prepare for our final ride down this roller coaster we call youth, it will be sure to fondly say, goodbye Gen Z, hello Gen A. Making this video was super nostalgic for me, and I'd love to know what part made you nostalgic too, so let me know in the comments. I've responded to thousands of you in my previous videos, and I'll be doing—
I think for me it's all the slang, the slang that we use today, because even I use the slang that these kids use. I don't say gyat. I don't say riz. But I would say something is bussin' once in a while just to play around.